It's also important to know that words written down and words delivered are different. They may sound good written down in a written format in literature, great, but they may not necessarily deliver with the same impact. So you've got to be aware of that nuance as well.
River on, stay aware, stay ahead, stay on. News flows, AI scanning, markets breathe, blockchains running.
This is Riverian Studios. My name is Urian Benconsejo, otherwise known as Urian B, Yuri B, your Web3 wanderer, blockchain explorer, and AI enthusiast. And today we have someone very, very different from the typical guests we interview. So the person I'm talking to right now is actually a speech coach. For those people that don't know why it's relevant in crypto, I would like to share my story myself. Back then, I was very, very anonymous. And then I had the opportunity to go public and really talk to people in person during events and also doing interviews. And before that, I consulted a speech coach myself. So that really gave me the confidence and everything. And now I'm talking to a professional who's hopefully going to give me a little bit more tips, a little bit more insights on what makes a good interviewer, a good podcaster, and of course, his thoughts on the market, his thoughts on crypto, and his thoughts on everything in between. Vinny, the speech coach, thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, definitely. Before we start with the serious stuff, the technical stuff, we usually have our first question to be around nostalgia. Um, so the question we usually ask our guests at the start of the interview is a little bit about their childhood. So I know your profession has a lot to do with speaking. Could you share with us a little bit of a parallel or something that happened in your childhood that you think directed you towards this path?
Um, yeah, sure. It was always being told to shut up. So I think I did a lot of talking, maybe out of line. I didn't really think about doing anything related to this until I was in high school, where I was able to. I got introduced to the performing arts, and I got introduced to the performing arts because I came from, let's say, a very energetic household, if you like. My father's use of discipline to make sure his kids stayed in line was a bit heavy-handed, and that had an adverse effect on me. So I became essentially, I was quite a violent young man, and I was on the route to nowhere. And then I went into high school, and my form tutor, who was also my drama teacher, found that by putting me through performing arts or introducing me to drama, I was able to channel that energy into something more positive. Because if she hadn't done that, my trajectory was going towards what you would say over here, being kept by His Majesty's finest, which would be slopping out or in prison, essentially. So that's kind of where it all started. Before that, I would audition for or attempt to or put my name forward to being part of drama productions in school and so on and so forth, but nothing really came about. So it was really when I was in high school and was really fortunate to find a person who believed in me.
How do you transition from that drama class to making an actual career out of it, making an actual path out of it? What were some professional opportunities that opened up maybe while you were starting, and how did they snowball into something bigger?
So I really took to drama. It became all encompassing. I found that it was such a beautiful vehicle for me, and any frustrations, any manifestations of violence or anger could really be channeled in a very positive way into learning a script or becoming a character and becoming or portraying a character so well that the audience were entertained or they were moved in a particular way. A large part of that was understanding how the script or words had to be delivered. And again, I had some very good training from my teacher, but I also watched a lot of film, a lot of television. And so there's nothing better than being entertained and learning something. And so I was completely into it. I took it on completely, was overwhelmed by it, not overwhelmed by it, but it was all encompassing. There's a better way of putting it. And as I, went from 13 to 15, 16, 17, and I delivered monologues and was taking part in stage productions, people from my family would come over and saying, "Look, Vinny, I've seen you do this, and I have a speech to give at work tomorrow. I need to address a congregation of people. Could you just listen to my speech and give me any tips?" That's kind of how it started. But at this point, I still had no plans on becoming a speech coach. What I wanted to do was be an actor. And fortunately, unfortunately, my father wasn't in agreement with that. And I had to very quickly find another path, something that interested me. And it wasn't medicine, and it wasn't law, and it wasn't engineering, and it wasn't accounting, and it wasn't dentistry, and it wasn't computing. And I essentially did an audit on my own life. And I realized that communication was essentially my thing, if you like. And so I studied speech and language therapy at university to become a speech and language therapist. But when I decided to embark on that journey, I made a promise to myself not to go back in front of the camera because it was just all encompassing. So after having done really well at GCSE level, if you like, I failed my A levels twice because I just wasn't committed to the cause and because my interest and my passion was on stage, theatre, television, and film. And if I needed to concentrate on something and make a life out of it, I needed to give it everything I had. And that's the decision I made. At the same time as making that decision, I did tell myself that after I had completed this course, my aim would be to combine everything I knew in the performing arts to everything I knew with respect to clinical communication and create something not unlike what I've done today.
I think I have to jump the gun, but I want to ask about how you transition into the crypto blockchain Web3 world as well. Just because, I mean, in this industry, speech is everything. Performance is a very, very big part of what we do. We have to convince the audience, convince the investors, and convince the consumers about the products we're talking to. How did you enter into this particular industry?
I was approached by, I don't think they'll mind me saying, by Fidium. And this was going back, I think, a couple of years. They were embarking on a series of pitch competitions that allowed them, that was part of, I think, the MasterCard Lighthouse, the slush competition that takes place in Norway, if I'm not mistaken. It happens every year. It's sponsored by MasterCard Lighthouse. And Fidium had been shortlisted, and they had to go through a series of events which involved them pitching. And so I was approached by them, and I was asked if I could support them to do it. And they ended up winning slush. Everything, all the awards going at that particular competition. At the same time, I guess my name got passed around certain circles, and so different people from different organizations would, in the crypto world or in the blockchain world, would approach me or did approach me and asked for much of the same. It was either improving their pitch, improving their presentation techniques, and as well as finding out, how to behave when on a podcast, how to prepare for a podcast, how to have a decent voice on a podcast, how to manage panel discussions and mediate appropriately so that you're in control, but you're still allowing people to have that free flowing sense of sharing stories so that the audience can get engaged. And before I know it, or before I knew it, I should say, there I was going to Dubai, which was this year. And then I found myself in Singapore later this year, which is where you and I connected.
Yeah, it was too bad we weren't able to meet up in person. I think this conversation in person would have been more interesting, more organic. But like even right now, over this virtual type of interview, I can already sense a lot of the quality in terms of how you communicate and how I'm receiving it as well. Going from a a background of not talking too much to people, I think, because a lot of people in blockchain or Web3 space, we just usually deal with the data
Mhm.
and we usually just chat each other. But I think lately there's been this huge shift towards the importance or the demand for in-person conversations. So
Mhm.
people have been going to more events, talking to more people. Talking to people has become part of the actual job. Gone were the days where we would just chat over each other, and now there's really an in-person conversation. What were some things you might have noticed about this industry? Maybe some patterns you've seen executives or people within this industry have that either are good or bad when it comes to communication.
I think you've touched on quite a lot of them. So, founders in the industry are traditionally those people spend a lot of their time behind a computer screen. The majority of the time, which someone said, 26 hours a day, 8 days a week, 400 days a year. And they spend so much time behind the screen. They come up with fantastic. I'm so lucky to be in this space. I've seen some fantastic concepts been brought to life. And whilst their ideas are good, even the execution's good, and they could come up with a prototype, for example, when it comes to wanting, venture capitalist investment, how can they tell a story that's compelling enough that allows people to to buy in? How comfortable are they asking strangers for cash? And that's where the breakdown is. And that's where I still see the breakdown. It's one thing having an idea, but if you can't sell the idea in a compelling manner, if you can't explain the concepts of that idea to the people that matter, and slowly but surely, you'll see this, you need to become more granular. You need to explain it at ground level. You need to overcome that trench that is widening between tech and, consumership, right? And they need to be able to deliver their message in a way that has impact. Best way to do that is to tell stories. You can list data until the cows come home, but the truth is data deteriorates and stories stick.
So going back to my personal experience, I think because this topic is also quite personal for me because I experienced firsthand how it was like being behind the screen to having to talk in front of hundreds of people as well. I had a speech coach back then, as I mentioned, and one thing he really told me to do is don't be afraid to be a little bit more vulnerable when you're on stage, and
Mhm,
don't be afraid to share your stories, as you said. I think there's a lot of struggle when it comes to knowing how much vulnerability you're supposed to share, and
mhm,
as you said, telling a story from a tech perspective, sometimes we focus only on the details or
mhm.
only on the important parts, and we don't really know that much about the flow of a story. Could you give us maybe some tips on what you think a good story would be like for a typical founder?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I don't know about the typical founder, but generally what you want to do with stories, so is you want to talk about the adventure that you're having as you're hitting different points, right? So, like I said, the majority of people that I dealt with or do deal with have spent their time have spent so long behind a computer screen with code and data and so on and so forth. They understand their end point, and there may be lots of different things going on around them, but they don't talk about those because we generally tend to ignore those things as we're on our mission to our target. I'll give you an example, just out of interest, tea or coffee? What do you drink?
I'm a terrible person when it comes to coffee. I like my coffee black and I just like it cold. And I just like it because it's very, very fast and it's very, very efficient.
Cool, my man. Each to their own. Great. So, how would you make a cup of coffee in 5 steps?
The first would be, of course, to get a cup, open your coffee,
Mhm.
the pack, put it in, some hot water, mix it, and then some cold water to the brim. And then if you have some ice, then put some ice and then you're done. You take the first sip.
Excellent. And that is what I would expect. Now, talk to me about what's happening whilst you're making that coffee.
Well, first, I have to choose what cup I want to drink from. I actually have two. So I have blue and green. I think blue is for my heavy days and green is for my light days.
Mhm,
So there's kind of a ritual there. If I know it's going to be a bit heavy, I pick up my blue cup.
mhm.
After that, I get a pack or two. It depends on how heavy the day is going to be as well.
Okay.
So if it's going to be heavy, then I double dose my coffee.
Okay.
If it's just going to be a light day, then I start with maybe just one pack,
Okay.
and then I
So
pour the
you've just given
hot
me,
water. I
sorry to interject, you've just given me some excellent information. Whether your coffee is cold and black and so on and so forth, I'm slowly going to forget. But the fact that you have heavy days and light days, and according to the kind of day you're having, you're going to choose a particular cup, right? So now, if I were to ask you, how do you make a cup of coffee in 5 steps? Your introduction will be, what kind of coffee I make begins at the decision of what kind of cup I'm going to have. And the kind of cup I'm going to have will depend on whether it's going to be a heavy day or a light day. It's going to be green or it's going to be blue. And that is what I mean about wrapping data into a story. It is the nuances that we sometimes ignore, the things that we need to put to one side, or the things we need to get over, through, or around that form part of the story. I'm British, I'm also Indian, so that makes me a big tea drinker. And if someone were to ask me that, how do I make a cup of tea in the morning? I start with, no one talks to me in the morning until I've made my first cup of tea. No one. Not my wife, not my two daughters, not even the dog. And that's how I start my story. The data will follow, but it is these things that everyone can relate to. Everyone can relate to having a heavy day or a light day. Those of us who drink cold coffee or need caffeine in the morning can relate to what we go through in order to get that first shot of caffeine to wake us up. And everyone has a ritual when it comes to doing things on a routine daily basis, right? And it's about having the right language to describe these things. So you're basically setting a scene and then populating that scene with the data. And you can talk about, I take 5 sugars in my coffee, 2 creams, 3 dashes of hazelnut syrup, and before I know it, I've got a bit of coffee with my hazelnut syrup and sugar. But essentially, that's what you're doing. You're attempting to put in human emotion and sentiments into what would otherwise be very stark, emotionless data.
The next question I have is a little bit more about something that I find myself doing a lot,
Mhm.
which is when I give presentations, sometimes I get overwhelmed with the data. There's a lot of times where you have to say so much in so little time that you don't know what to prioritize. And I usually find that those presentations don't do well
Mhm.
compared to presentations where it's just one singular point that you can have a lot of focus on. How would you approach maybe a situation like that where there's overwhelming data and you have to wrap in a story, or you have to have a story, a good narrative around it, but there's so many things you feel like are so important that people should learn or hear as well?
Well, what you want to do is you want to do a couple of things. You want to not make it so complex, number one, and you want to make it easy for the audience to understand. Because if you do that, they don't have to spend so much time, effort, and energy understanding what you're saying. And the likelihood of you actually being remembered and them understanding things goes up. So let's make it easier for you. Stick to one story with one data point. And if you've got to describe another data point, try and put 2 data points into that. It's difficult if you're saying, if you're overwhelmed by data, you're not going to fit it all into one story. So set it up as different stories. And it's quite easy to do because in your day-to-day life, from the moment you get up to the moment you go to sleep, you participate in a number of different stories. You have your story at work, you have your story at home. If you have a partner, you have a story with them. If you have a pet or a dog you need to take for a walk, can you guess? I've got to take the dog for a walk. You have a story with them. If you have children, you have a story with them. You spoke to a friend, there's a story there. You had an interaction from the person you bought a cup of coffee from, but you didn't want to do it at home. There's a story there. You can create smaller stories. And sometimes you have to make the decision. What data is really that important? Gun to your head, what could you lose? Because unless you're delivering a life-changing lecture, if you're right, it's a presentation. And a presentation is a snapshot. It's this is the information we've got. And you can also put on any slide, if you'd like more or to find out more, press here, contact me. This can be sent. This is just a snapshot. Manage the audience's expectations. For example, now we have been overwhelmed with the amount of data that we've got on this latest thing. So I'm just going to give you the snapshot, right? I'm going to give you the main points. If you'd like any more, contact me, send me an email, and I'll send that information over to you. Manage the audience. If you manage the audience's expectations, in turn, you manage your own expectations. And it's about lowering the load.
Before we continue to talk more about speech and good practices and communication, I also want to ask about your journey to Web3 and blockchain. Aside from your work with executives, with people in the industry, do you have a personal journey, or how did you discover blockchain? And do you also participate? Are there things in the market that you find interesting?
But the short answer is yes. I'm also a great believer. I don't like being one of these people who I need to know what it is that I'm talking about. I also need to know what it is that my clients are talking about, excuse me. And for a large proportion of the time that I've been in this space, it was a case of whoosh, you just nothing made sense. And I didn't have the time to sit down with three different dictionaries and figure out what was being spoken about, the number of abbreviations and acronyms and trade fi and DeFi, Wi-Fi, who fly, muck fly. It was nuts, and it was just more trouble than it was worth. My recent trip to Singapore, I met with a different group of people, and Web3 was becoming more and more prominent. And I decided to venture into this. And I asked for some assistance. And actually, I saw a post on LinkedIn from someone who's a big name within the field. And they said the best way to learn is to actually take part in it. So participate in it. And I thought, that makes sense. Now, during Web 2, I can say this now because I kind of know what I'm talking about. During the .com boom, I went out as a linguist and I bought a number of .coms, .co.uks. I bought a number of domain names and then resold them and did pretty well. Things like chipsandbeans.co.uk. I bought Phantom Snapper and I bought one called That's My Missus. I'm going to tell you what that's about. But I just enjoyed the linguistic play or the socio-linguistic play on domain names that attributed themselves to certain parts of society. So what I have done, and they were absolutely right, it's a steep learning curve. I went over to Freename and I bought some Web3 real estate. And that's where it is that I am at the moment. So I've bought some real estate. I've obviously bought my own, I bought Dot the speech coach and Dot public speaking coach, so on and so forth. So I'm going to be doing some reselling. I've got some bigger ideas with some other TLDs that I've bought, but that's kind of where it is that I'm at the moment. And also understanding the whole idea of tokenization, the idea of adding value to something which would not otherwise be valued, and then being able to convert that value into a tradable asset. Oh my God, I'm using language that I didn't think I would use, and I actually understand what I'm talking about. So that's where it is that I'm at the moment.
What you're going through is very, very relatable for a lot of people in the field. When we started out, we had to lose money and then kind of like revenge learn in order to actually understand what we're doing. So
Right.
it's usually you wanna, because like it's all about money, and then you try to do something and then you lose money, and then
Mhm,
why did I lose? Oh, I didn't know so many things. And then
mhm,
you've revenge learned that, and then that's when you finally like actually participate. So
mhm,
that's a common story we have in our industry. And I do agree with you that there's so many abbreviations um, that we in the field don't even know. And we're constantly trying to learn as well,
mhm.
just because of how wide it is. But if you were to maybe do something or advise a project, how to simplify something that's quite complex, where do you even start?
I ask all my clients to write one single statement per idea that they have. Quite similar to how LinkedIn is changing, for example, and people are, I'm a speech coach. What do? I help people know what to say, how to say it, and how to own it. Really. So, unfortunately, or fortunately, as the case may be, language always is evolving. The way we communicate is evolving. But what we have seen is that people are becoming very simple in terms of the language they use, especially for marketing. Now, that may be because everyone's a slave to the algorithm to a certain extent, but it has its place. You need to simplify what it is that you wish to say, not dumbing it down by a long shot, just simplifying it. When you've been involved in an industry or an organization or an institute for a long time, you become institutionalized with respect to the language that you use. When I was heavily involved in working in clinics in brain injury units, for example, we would classify a stroke as something else. We would use medical terminology, but I couldn't use that when I was speaking to parents or partners of the people who'd been injured. I had to break it down into layman's terms because to the idea was for them to understand what it is that I'm saying. So I had to make my language more accessible. So it's about using accessible language. And accessible language isn't dumbing the idea down, it's simplifying it so that more people understand, even people within the industry. Even people within the industry have to decode an abbreviation or an acronym, or your brain has to, in order to understand what's being said. If you simplify the language, I think everyone will be a little bit happier. So the first step, write down a single statement or a single sentence for every idea or everything, every concept that you're wanting to inform others about. And then you go through that and see, right, can I link this sentence to the next sentence? And if I can, how would I bridge them? How would I combine them together? And then you look at the overall maturity or, yes, sir.
Sorry, I think your camera turned off.
They're trying to
Okay,
silence us. That's what
please
they're trying to
continue.
do. So can't remember where I was, but I'll start again. So once you've written a line or a sentence or a statement, a simplified statement for every idea, you put the sentences together or the statements together, and you see how they read or you see how you would deliver them. It's also important to know that words written down and words delivered are different. They may sound good written down in a written format in literature, great, but they may not necessarily deliver with the same impact. So you've got to be aware of that nuance as well. And keep it light. You know, have information packs ready to go if they want to know more. You're there to present for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4. You're never going to completely give them the entire industry on a plate. So be aware of that. Use other formats that you have to your advantage.
I think the next question I have has something to do with selling, just because a lot of the times when in the industry, the people who are good at talking are naturally salespeople. But of course, with the difference in the structure of how even the executives have to be public as well,
Mhm.
the executives now have to learn how to sell the idea as well. And that's also not something a lot of the executives themselves know how to do.
Mhm.
Could you maybe give us a simplified breakdown of what is effective communication when it comes to selling an idea?
I could, and this would have been done by people far brighter than me. So you have a gentleman by the name of Rory Sutherland who's very good at this, and he talks about this. And what he says is just describe the pain point. What is it you are attempting to fix? So I'm the CEO of the speech coach, for example. And I have found out that people out there speak when they speak and they have wonderful concepts, but they use too much jargon. And you can see in the audience that they're being lost because there's too much jargon. So how do you make sure you keep the jargon? Well, what we decided to do was just simplify the language. That way, attendance went up, audience attention went up, and hopefully the cohort will grow. Do you see what I mean? It's about the story should be CEOs need to be talking about why they're doing what they're doing and what problem they are solving. And if they talk about and they keep talking about the problems they're solving and how that has a positive impact on different areas of industry and how that contributes to their overall mission, then they're selling it for themselves.
That makes a lot of sense. And very, very interesting how you put it that way. I think I want to dive deeper into not just the sales part of being an executive, but as you mentioned something a while ago about how we were a slave to the algorithm. And I do find it so that a lot of people, when they talk, there are certain styles or talking points that seem like they're designed, quote unquote, for the algorithm. Like they know how to say something that makes the media go pop. And although sometimes it works, sometimes it also feels very, very repetitive. Could you maybe unmask what's happening so that we can understand it much better?
I don't know where they've come from, but statements like, I know, right? Or do you agree? Would you agree? But you don't say these things. that these things have just like found their way onto social media platforms, and then everyone adopts them. And I don't know if it's the algorithm that forces it or it's the other way around, but quite frankly, everyone starts using the same kind of language. And you don't have to go too deep across your LinkedIn Rolodex to see the same people use it. 9 out of 10 times because it's copy paste, then it could even be AI. There's almost this self-perpetuating cycle. What would I suggest? I suggest that, yes, to a certain extent, you have to allude to, or at least adopt best practice if you want to propagate your material across different social media platforms, and they all have their own rules. But at the same time, you want to be unique. What's the point sounding like everyone else? I've never understood that. Why do you want to sound like everyone else? You want to sound unique so that you stand out. There's plenty of room in whatever industry you're in and in the marketplace that represents that industry. Stand out. You don't have to stand out and be a clown or a circus or anything like that, but lean into who you are, your character. Always, I always try and write the way I speak. And yes, the way I would speak would depend on which audience I'm addressing. Hence, the way I write would differ depending on the audience that I'm addressing. So I don't know if I've gone round and round in circles over here. How would I unmask it? I would keep reading and read for pleasure. If people continue to read for pleasure, then what they will do is they'll continuously expand and grow what's known as your internal lexicon, this store of words that you have. But people aren't reading that much anymore. They scan and then take a deep dive when they see the information that they want, but no one reads for pleasure anymore, for entertainment, for imagination purposes, for the purposes of being taken from one place and being dropped off at another place. People either scan or they speed read. Oh, yeah, I understood all that. Did you, though? Did you really buy into it? Were you really taken on that journey? And so there's an issue of, I think, language enrichment. I do think that language is being dumbed down, and eventually people are all going to be doing algo speak or algorithm speak or speaking just the same way things are marketed in uh, just in the same manner that things are marketed on social media platforms. And remember that social media platforms want to do things in a very short, concise, viral, hook type manner. And unfortunately, or fortunately, life isn't like that.
Our next question is more about the uniqueness part because, as you said, everybody can sound the same, especially if they're using the same words and everything. But
Mm.
sometimes being unique also, if you're an executive or if you have a position, being unique or being yourself also comes with a little bit of risk, I think, or some people would at least look at it that way. You're not sure if your authentic self might be good for the company or which parts of yourself might be good for the company and which parts you have to like stay silent about or at least don't talk like that. Could you maybe explain a little bit more about like what is good in uniqueness and how do you stay unique and maybe attractive to your ideal audience as well?
It's a good question. It's a good question. And there's a lot of people talking about this need to be authentic. How do I be my authentic self? The phone call goes, Vinny, I want to be my authentic self. And I tell them, no, you don't. You don't want to be your authentic self. If you want to know your authentic self, the next time you go to the toilet for a number two, stick a mirror in front of you, look into that mirror. That is you being your authentic self. I guarantee it. You cannot get more authentic than that. I suggest you leave that person at home, though. I think what you actually mean is you want to speak with sincerity and integrity about whatever it is that you're talking about. And that's fair. You want to know, you want to sound like you know what it is that you're talking about. And you want to do it in a way that people believe you. So you want to speak with integrity, sincerity, whilst being engaging and influential to other people. Feel free to jump in at any time. I'm really open to having a debate about this if you like. How do you do that? Well, the entertainment value is the thing that you put into it later. You need to start somewhere, and the way you start is writing down what it is that you wish to say, right? That way you know the information you're about to impart. And then when it comes, and when you write it the way that you would say it. Use your language, use your terms. Yes, and excuse it, I am going to swear. If you fucking swear, swear when you write it down. This is still the first draft. A lot of the CEOs that I've seen, they all sound the same. We've all been to the same school of CEO, how to talk like a CEO. And it's a nonsense. It's an absolute nonsense. What they're missing out on is leveraging the one thing that makes them unique. Them. If you and I were to give a talk on any subject, I'd expect your talk to be completely different to mine. Yes, we'd hit on the same points. Let's talk about, I don't know, first thing that comes to mind. Okay, the initiation, propagation, termination reaction of 1,1,1 trichloromethane. Okay, that's a solvent that they use in dry cleaning. Don't ask where that came from, sir. I've just popped up from nowhere. But expect your talk to be completely different to mine. But I would still expect you to hit the main points, right? The main points that are required for the talk. And so lean into yourself, write your own draft, write down what it is that you wish to say. Forget Chat GPT for a moment, leave that to one side. If you start with Chat GPT, you're anchored onto that already. That's not you. Okay. So you've got to start with putting your ideas down before you get the help. Okay. That's one way of doing it. Understand also that the way information is being delivered or needs to be delivered is changing. All right. It's changed more so over the last 3 to 4 years. People need to be told exactly what to do, exactly where to get it, exactly how to get it, and exactly what to do once they've got it. No long, and you know this because websites are changing, right? Websites used to be information, a whole heap of text, and then if you want, contact us. And now it's, what do you want? You want this? This is why you need it. This is why we're the best. Click here. Language is changing. I'm trying to make sure I answer your question. And the question was, how did they make sure that they're unique? Okay. You make sure you're unique by not using someone else's information, writing your information down first. And people don't like writing things down because it takes too much time. Remember, we're living in a push button, immediate gratification kind of era, right? So people don't like writing things down, which is a shame because if they don't write things down, are they possibly going to maintain continuity and consistency with what it is that they wish to say? I mean, it's a lot for the brain to take on and memorize and so on and so forth. It makes no sense. So write it down. Make sure you have an order to your story, beginning, middle, end. Make sure that when you're delivering something, and if something is, if it's a good thing, if something great has happened, show it in your voice. It can't be, today we made £1 million and we're very happy. That's bullshit. But people talk like that. People talk like that because they think or they believe that at those higher levels, those echelons up there where people can buy my life twice over and still have money left for the bus fare home, that's how they talk. And it isn't. It isn't the way they talk. So loosen up. By you loosening up and expressing in a formal manner, I'm not saying be informal. I'm not saying every second word needs to be some piece of profanity or anything like that, but you do have to loosen up. You do have to make sure your audience is engaged. You do need to use language that they understand. And it has to come from you first.
Thank you so much for that. That was really good advice when it comes to talking about focusing on being sincere and um, using the language that your audience understands, and of course simplifying it, going all the way back. I want to go a little bit more forward towards something that I used to struggle with, that I think I still struggle with today, and I think a lot of people in my industry struggle with, which is the stuttering and how to keep the ideas fresh and entertaining while being super critical about what we're saying. So I think on the spot, there's some sort of mental gymnastics going on where I want to be a bit more creative, but at the same time, I also have to respect the importance of what I have to say. And that can create the stuttering in between, in my personal experience. But yeah, basically around stuttering or bad speech practices that maybe you could give us some insights on.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to give me an example, please, if you don't mind.
I think if because sometimes in my mind I have this very clear idea, but I'm not able to like put the idea into words immediately. So
Okay.
what happens is sometimes I have to talk longer before I get to that shorter version of the idea.
Mhm.
And then in that process, the switch from the longer to the shorter period, that's when sometimes like I get to stutter or I just literally pause
Mhm.
and then collect myself before I go on.
Okay. So that level of disfluency, it's really common. And I think if that's going to happen, there are ways of countering it. And the way you would countering it is purely through preparation. And the way you prepare is, for example, I'll give yourself or write down all the different thoughts you have on a particular subject and then join the sentences and statements together and deliver that. Even if you deliver it to yourself, the fact that you've gone through the process and that you've played and processed the language to that level means that it primes your mind to have that language available to you. So that's point number one. Point number two, it happens to all of us, happens to me as well, trying to explain something really complex because I've got an idea in my head. And then it becomes so complex that I forget where it is that I am. And so I'm honest and I said, guys, I don't know where I'm going with this, but I'm going to start again. You have to be human. And you were talking earlier about vulnerability. You only have to be vulnerable enough. Thank you, actually. That's a good point. I hadn't talked about vulnerability, and this ties in nicely. So you only have to be vulnerable to the point of being human. Okay, you cannot be more than human. You're going to make mistakes. If you're going to make mistakes, it's okay. I keep telling people, don't believe the hype. Don't believe the hype. I had a client earlier today who was talking about, yeah, but then he goes to the end of the stage and he goes, I'm coming back, and the light follows him through. And I looked at him, that's been staged, my friend. It's been practiced. It's been rehearsed. People out there who can speak long periods of time extremely fluently without stammering, ironically, without stuttering or stammering, but they've been doing so for time and time again. You don't know what they do in the back. You don't know the amount of preparation. And I'm telling you, they do prepare. People have different ways of preparing. And over time, preparation compounds. I've had these questions fired at me months ago as well by different people. So I'm going to have an answer ready. I can definitely say you didn't send me a bank of questions to go through in order to answer for this podcast. And so to a certain extent, I'm doing everything on the fly, but I'm not because these questions have been thrown at me before. And so the more you process, play with, are exposed to different kinds of questions and the need to give answers in different ways, the better you'll become at it. But on the spot, if it happens, take your time. What more can you possibly do? We've taken away the fact that you can't answer it fluently, so take your time. If it's going to be complex, and prepare them. Guys, I know the answer to this, and it sounds really good in my head. If you bear with me, be honest, be human. You're going to make mistakes. When you make them, own them. There's going to be an error. That's okay. Don't try and brush over it, but at the same time, don't have to make me and it's a song and dance about it. Just own it. There was a time where I was really deep into delivering a keynote or a workshop, and I completely blanked out. I did not know and I very rarely have that. My wife will tell you I have it all the time, but I think I very rarely have that. And I didn't know what was coming next. And so I was honest with the audience and in the way it goes. So that's part one. And I know there's a part two, but ladies and gentlemen, I've forgotten what part two is. So we'll be back after a message from our sponsor. Oh, I'm back. I'm back. Guys, I've got it. I've got it. Right. Thank you very much. Or I've said, if I've forgotten my placement, I've asked a member of the audience, where was I? And so you've got some audience interaction and participation. You can't take yourself too seriously. Take your work as seriously as you want, as seriously as you want, especially if you're doing great things. But I try not to take myself too seriously. I ask my clients not to take themselves too seriously because makes it just removes this need to be holier than thou, to be more than what you are. You're enough. You're more than enough. Understand that the person that's going to be in front of the camera is not going to be the same person sitting on the toilet. It's not going to be the same person talking to wives, partners, dogs, children. You're a different person when you're on camera or when you're in front of an audience. Appreciate that. Lean into it. It's not rocket science. A lot of it is just, it's a process, it's frameworks, it's strategies, it's practice. People don't want to practice, they want to know. Oh man. Look at anyone who is worth anything in whatever they did. Jordan, Jackson, Tyson, time, effort, energy, but you don't see the work that they do behind the scenes. No one does.
Those were really, really good advice. I loved how you said take your work extremely seriously, but don't take yourself too seriously. And I think that's something, especially in the tech world, we forget to do. Sometimes we're just cramped up and we become too serious that sometimes it can feel a little bit icky just
Mhm,
because we're no longer human. We're just so focused on the data in the head and everything.
mhm,
Our last question has something to do with, I think, more about the industry as a whole, because we've already established that the importance of in-person communication is getting even bigger with everything happening right now. I think
mhm,
it's also because of AI and everything that communicating through text has become much easier, that communicating through speech has become more valuable. So
mhm,
that's why some founders they go on podcasts, they have public appearances, they give public speeches so that people can validate what they're saying, what they're thinking. The last question we have, of course, we would love to know much more about everything, but the last question we have for you is more on maybe going forward to 2026 and when AI is definitely going to take over a lot of portions of content creation.
mhm,
We already talked about uniqueness, but maybe we can talk about right now integration or how to stay relevant when
mhm.
it comes to communication moving forward.
How to stay relevant with respect to communication. I think I've got a lot of work coming over for the next few years, my friend. I'm not worried about what AI can and cannot do. It doesn't bother me in the slightest. I think what people need to do is go back to being analog for a bit. Really appreciate, a good conversation. Have micro conversations. And you do all the time. We're just not used to it. You know, keep having the small conversations, micro conversations. When you go out and buy that coffee, right? Have a conversation. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. These things matter. They matter because what you're doing is you're speaking to a stranger and you're greeting them with a sentiment that hopefully is sincere. And so when you're now talking to an audience, you map over the same skill. And there are people out there in the space that do this wonderfully well. I met some of them. Aram, for example, Dan Held, nice guy, said hello to me. Didn't have to. Big name in the space, but follows me connected. And he said hello. He's really nice for me. And he speaks really well. And then you have those guys, like you said, they spend 24/7 cramped in a room in front of a screen, and they don't have that interaction outside, the social, meaningful, emotion-based interaction outside. The less we do that, the less we're going to sound like the AI that we are creating. And if you look at the cycles that are taking place, people are using Chat GPT for counseling, for crying out loud. We are at a real strange crossroads if um, essentially a computer with no emotion, no life experience is able to resolve some of people's deepest, darkest aspects of the human condition. That is, I'm not saying it cannot help. I'm saying be wary. The thing that makes us human is our ability to communicate, our ability to accommodate, our ability to adapt. And we have to lean more into those things. And you'll see I'm working with a lot of people who wish to get this message out. You'll be seeing more and more and more of this. Presentations need to change, man. Moving forward, I went to Token 2049 in Dubai and in Singapore. And I predicted everything that people were going to have a problem with. It's on YouTube, it's on LinkedIn, take a look. And what I saw was exactly what I predicted. But then there are people there patting themselves on the back. And I'm thinking, oh, is that really the barrier? Is that it? That's what you consider to be great. Trillions of dollars in the whole space, and you do a presentation that looked like it came out of high school. If you're, and I don't think people are going to go down the AI route for everything. If so, why would you hold something like Token 2049? Right? You could all have done it from the comfort of your own living rooms and bedrooms. But there is a human need to connect. It doesn't matter how much tech you build. What's going to happen is human connection is going to be the thing that you will end up paying millions and millions of dollars for, because everything else is going to be tech based. So if you want something authentic, you'd have to pay for someone like me to come in. I'll be really rich. We'll be doing more of these. I'm joking, man. But it's the human interaction is going to become really precious. So it's either we do something about it now or we wait for that cycle to take place and see it happening. It's like what people do with the GM modified foods and organic food, right? People want something which is real and natural. So with AI taking over, best thing to do is write down your ideas, create your own presentation, and then ask AI to refine it for you. When it refines it for you, have a look at what it's done. Don't just take it as read that it's going to do as you ask it. And don't necessarily accept it for what it is. Make sure you take ownership and ask. It's supposed to be a tool, use it for a tool. It's not supposed to be there instead of you. I rambled a little bit there. I hope I answered the question.
It was a really, really good answer. And yeah, definitely the importance of connection, human connection, the emotional connection will be big moving forward now that everything is automated and everything. Before we go, Vinny, thank you so much for your time.
You're
Where
welcome.
can people find you and what type of services do you offer?
So I am the speech coach. So essentially, when it comes to public speaking, if you stutter, clutter, mutter, mumble, fumble, stumble, bumble, crumble, muddle, fuddle, diddle, daddle, find yourself upstream without a paddle, let's talk. www.thespeech.coach is my website. You can find me at LinkedIn, on LinkedIn at The Speech Coach, and across all social media platforms at The Speech Coach. And I even have my own YouTube channel, having gone back in front of the camera after 25 years. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Yuri.
Vinny, thank you so much.